Okay, here we go. Harriet Jacobs, part two. Let me just point out some places where you see Jacobs saying that purity, as a female slave, purity was just out of the question. If you look over on page 918, okay, so yeah, 918, here's where she's going to start talking about this. All right, this is the first full paragraph down on 918. And now, reader, I come to a period in my unhappy life which I would gladly forget if I could. The remembrance fills me with sorrow and shame. It pains me to tell you of it, but I've promised to tell you the truth, and I will do it honestly. Let it cost me what it may. Okay, for years, my master had done his utmost to pollute my mind with foul images and to destroy the pure principles inculcated by my grandmother. Okay, so purity, she even uses the word pure. And the good mistress of my childhood. The influences of slavery had had the same effect on me that they had on other young girls. They had made me prematurely knowing concerning the evil ways of the world. I knew what I did, and I did it with deliberate calculation. But oh, ye happy women. So, see, she's addressing women in this narrative. But oh, ye happy women whose purity has been sheltered from childhood. And then goes on from there. Actually, I'll just read this whole sentence. I think it's important. Whose purity has been sheltered from childhood, who have been free to choose the objects of your affection, whose homes are protected by law. Okay, there's the domestic ideal there. Also, homes are protected. Do not judge the pure, desolate slave girl too severely. If slavery had been abolished, I too, excuse me, I too could have married the man of my choice. And then goes on from there. Again, if there were no such thing as slavery, these fundamental pure principles that I was taught, and the sanctity of my own home, the domesticity would not have been destroyed. If you're looking for a villain in all this, blame slavery, okay? But again, she knows her audience. She's talking about very sensitive subject here, which is sexuality. And if it's a sensitive subject today, imagine what it was 160 years ago. She's talking about how she's a fallen woman, you know? She had sex outside of marriage. She knows her readers' expectations. That if you're a fallen woman, you're gonna die. Sorry, to put it bluntly, but we saw that in Susanna Rowson, right, with Charlotte Temple. Doesn't matter how good a person you are. If you're a fallen woman, you die. So she's at great pains here. She's she's bending over backwards trying to say, hey, I take responsibility, I take responsibility, I take responsibility. However, you know, look at what she says here at the end of that passage I just read. Do not judge the poor, desolate slave girl too severely. Those are profound and powerful words. She's saying, I wanted the protections of purity, but because by some definition of purity, I'm the one who screwed up, because I chased after some other man, doesn't matter. You know, I'm a slave girl, and look, what else was I supposed to do? So, yeah, and so just to make sure this point is clear, not sure if you all were completely straight on this, according to Harriet Jacobs, her slave master was not successful in sexually assaulting her. she was able to keep him at arm's length and just put up with what we would call today sexual harassment, you know, making all these suggestive comments and propositioning her and all this sort of unwanted stuff. Today we'd call that sexual harassment. So in order to keep that garbage from happening and to keep it from escalating any further, Jacobs is like, all right, I'm going to choose my own man to lose my purity to. At least that'll give me some sense of control over my life and my body. So she connects with a man named Mr. Sands and has an affair with him and actually has 2 children with him. Okay, so that's what happened. Okay. So what's really fascinating here, and just as maybe a quick digression here, you know, we can say, my goodness, it seems like, you know, you're doing the opposite of advancing a feminist kind of message here. You know, Fannie Fern, Margaret Fuller, they're saying, look, you know, loosen up all these restrictions on women. And it looks like, you know, Harriet Jacobs is saying, no, I want domesticity and purity and submissiveness. I want all those traditional virtues. And so that makes it sound like she's definitely being anti-racist, abolitionist, anti-slavery. But what happens to the feminist message in all this? It seems very traditional, like she's delivering a very traditional message about women's roles. But here's where I think maybe she's not. She's saying, look, all y'all out there who might be wanting to judge a woman like me for finding themselves in some kind of a horrible mess, don't be so quick to judge women. You know, okay, that's a feminist message. She's saying, don't be so quick to judge we slave women. Don't be so quick to judge, you know, the fact that I lost my purity. And the implications of that are that there are lots and lots of other women out there that people would be inclined to say, oh, well, it's her fault, right? What are the cliche kind of ways we have of blaming women? Well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? Where were you going? You know, all that kind of garbage. A way of making it, you know, blaming the victim, as we say, right? Harriet Jacobs is saying, stop doing that. Don't blame the victim. You know, you don't know what she was having to go through, okay? That's a very feminist message. So I want you to remember that, please. Okay, and then so also what's really cool here too, where Jacobs is delivering a feminist message, you know, we remember what happened, the upshot of the Charlotte Temple novel, you know, again, just to repeat myself, good girls get married well, find a good husband, etc. Bad girls die. Sorry to put it bluntly, I don't mean to make light of a serious situation, but yeah, good girls get married, bad girls die. Doesn't matter how repentant you are. Here we see Jacobs. By definition of the time, she's a bad girl. Doesn't matter how repentant she is, you know, you still got to die. That's another thing about this book that where we can understand it to be delivering a feminist message. Harriet Jacobs does get on with her life. Yes, she's a fallen woman like Charlotte Temple, but she's able to make the case that it's slavery that did this. I'm going to get on with my life. I'm going to get my kids back. I'm going to fight and scrape and claw to get my life back. And in the process, I'm going to help other women who are in a position just like me. especially slave women. So you see what she's doing? Society would try to condemn her for being a fallen woman, but she's saying no, no. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to fight slavery and say it's slavery that caused this. If you're looking for a villain in this story, yes, I'm sorry for what happened, and yes, I had a role in it, but if you're really looking for a villain here, it's slavery. And if you want to keep women from being fallen women, if you want to protect women, if you want to help guarantee that women are going to stay good and pure women, you're going to do everything in your power to attack slavery. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so if you look over on page 919, you'll see that she's doing everything that she can here, again to, she's asking for forgiveness, but she's blaming slavery, and she's also delivering a feminist message, which is, these virtues, as we've already studied all through the semester, that many women were, of course, looking at as being very restrictive. Jacobs is saying, time to loosen up on these. Don't blame women if it seems like they're not living up to them. Okay. So, 919. This is second half of that very long first paragraph on 919. So here again, she's talking about her decision to have an affair with Mr. Sands to get away from Dr. Flint. With all these thoughts revolving in my mind and seeing no other way of escaping the doom I so much dreaded, I made a headlong plunge. Pity me and pardon me, O virtuous reader. You never knew what it is to be a slave, to be entirely unprotected by law or custom, to have the laws reduce you to the condition of a chattel, entirely subject to the will of another. You never exhausted your ingenuity in avoiding the snares and eluding the power of a hated tyrant. Dr. Flint, of course. You never shuddered at the sound of his footsteps and trembled within hearing of his voice. I know I did wrong. No one can feel it more sensibly than I do. The painful and humiliating memory will haunt me to my dying day. Still, in looking back calmly on the events of my life, I feel that the slave woman ought not to be judged by the same standard as others. Okay, yeah, powerful, powerful stuff. Wow, this is right from the heart, right from the heart. Yeah, I have nothing but the deepest admiration for Harriet Jacobs. I really do. Okay. So, all right. Well, one other thing. We talked a little bit about what's supposed to happen for the ending of a story for a, quote, good girl, the ending for a bad girl. Good girl, like, Mrs. Richmond in Charlotte Temple marries a good man like General Richmond and lives happily ever after. Quote unquote, bad girl, like Charlotte or LaRue, they end up dead. Novels at this time period, there really wasn't any middle ground. It's either you get married or you die. So let's look at the ending of this story. She doesn't marry and she doesn't die. And so how then is the ending, the complex ending of her story, leading to a different kind of message? If you look over on page 930, you'll see this final message here. Okay. Yeah, these are the last lines of the story now, okay? Last paragraph, I should say, 930. Reader, my story ends with freedom, not in the usual way with marriage. Okay, so yeah, typical, well, think about, even movies today, romantic comedy. So many of them end with marriage even now. That's your happily ever after, and the prince and the princess lived happily ever after together, right? Okay, so you get it. So she's saying, yes, I am I am free, but there is no happily ever after ending in a traditional sense. Okay. I and my children are now free. We are as free from the power of slaveholders as are the white people of the North. And though that, according to my ideas, is not saying a great deal, it is a vast improvement in my condition. So again, there's still this bittersweet note here. There's something that's not, there's something unresolved or unfinished, and that's deliberate. I'm going to comment on that in a second. The dream of my life is not yet realized. I do not sit with my children in a home of my own. Okay, so she's not been able to realize domesticity. And so the implication, though she doesn't say it, is that, I'll never be able to get my purity back. And which means, she's, for this time period, for a woman to be a single mom and to have lost her purity outside of marriage, she's well aware that may mean she'll never be able to have a good husband. So you see, there's still something very bittersweet and unhappy and unresolved about even this ending. Okay. The dream of my okay, yeah, all right, I already said that. I still long for a hearthstone of my own, meaning a home, right? However humble. I wish it for my children's sake far more than for my own. Okay. So, yeah, let me just end right there with that. And just think about it for a second. What would the effect be on you, or on, if you're a reader in 1860, or on other readers of 1860, if they read the book and it's just like, she's just like, oh my gosh, it's fabulous. I'm free. I get to go outside and buy bagels, whatever I want. Can go out and eat some yummy tacos whenever I want to. I can hang out with my friends. My kids are in school. They're making friends. Everything's great. What would the takeaway message of that be for us? We could put the book down and say, man, that was one heck of a story. But man, but we're good now, right? Everything's fine. Everything's cool. She's good. Kids are good. Great. And then I can go about my business. What was the example I was using before? I can, I can go back to fishing now, and I don't have to think about this anymore, right? No. Of course, that's not the message she wants to leave her readers with. She wants to leave them with the idea. That things are still pretty bad. If they're not great for me, even after everything I've been through, think about the 4 million men and women, African American women that are still held in slavery. Think about them. Even with all the help and good fortune I've had, and I'm free and things still aren't great, What about the 4 million people still in bondage? This ain't good. So she's saying, what I want you to do, dear reader, is go talk to your husband, go to your church, talk with some folks at church next time you're there on Sunday about what your church is doing, and maybe you can join and help out, and see if there are people like me that you can reach out to and give a helping hand. Okay? This is bittersweet stuff. It's heart-wrenching, and it's meant to be. How else are we going to step out of our apathy? You know, we'd all love to go about our lives thinking things are just fine. And again, that's the fundamental purpose of Douglas and Jacobs, to get us, you know, in our happy homes. And, you know, you're seeing a little bit of my home here. You know, I'm happy and content here. Things are fine. I'm one of the lucky ones. I was able to pay my mortgage this month. You know, how are we going to reach out to people like me so we can care about, so someone like me can learn to care about more than my own home here? How can I learn to reach out to folks out there who maybe don't have things as good as I've got it? It's tough work, tough work. And Douglas and Jacobs knew how tough it was, but they weren't going to shut up. You know, they had a mission, they had a life purpose. So, you know, thank goodness slavery has been abolished. But does that mean things in our world today are just fine? I think you already know the answer to that. So one final message I'd like to leave you with, and it's this. In what ways can you get involved in the world where you can make a positive difference to help other people that might not be as fortunate as you? What can you do to reach out to make a difference in their lives? What ways can you reach out and speak out against injustice, the many forms of injustice that there are in the world today? I'll just give you one example. Just because slavery is abolished in this country doesn't mean that there is no such thing as human trafficking anymore. Human trafficking is a big problem. And, you know, there's this phenomenon that we still call sex slavery. Very sweet neighbor that I had growing up. She's 92 years old, really neat lady. And she's dedicated her life to trying to put an end to human trafficking, sex slavery. And so that might be one thing that you can jump on board with and try to be of service. So, but, you know, your pick, your choice. But I'll tell you this one thing, that it does lead to a much more enriching life when we know that we're living a life of service where we can really make a positive contribution to the lives of others. So, you know, just put that in the back of your mind. Think about ways that you can help. Okay? All right. Have a good weekend, and be meeting with you soon.